It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, our top story. The number of people killed in a devastating earthquake in Morocco rises to more than 1,300. The UK and the US offer aid as rescuers desperately search for survivors. Also tonight, police recapture the terror suspect Daniel Khalife 3 days after he escaped from jail. Police confirm he was caught by the side of a canal in West London and pulled off a bike by a plainclothes officer. The Prime Minister calls for more time as he tries to secure a post-Brexit trade deal with India. As people swelter in the heat, the UK records the hottest day of the year, plus...
Ik bin ein Düsseldorfer.
Prince Harry shows his language skills as he opens the Invictus Games in Germany. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages for you in our press preview from 10:30. Good evening. Officials in Morocco say that more than 1,300 people are now known to have died in a powerful earthquake, and the number of casualties is expected to rise. The 6.8 magnitude quake struck late last night in the Atlas Mountains, 50 miles south of Marrakesh, causing devastation across a wide area. Well, Sky's Adam Parsons joins us live now from Marrakesh. And Adam, describe the scene to us in what is a really busy city there.
Yeah, well, to arrive in Marrakesh is to arrive in a city, in a country that is shocked, bewildered and struggling to come to terms with what happened in this region almost exactly 24 hours ago. You said this is a really big tourist city. This is one of the best known mosques in Marrakesh. And just have a look up there. You can see how the top of that building has been ripped by the power of that earthquake, the 6.8 magnitude earthquake that hit last night. Now, what's happened here is that the rubble has all tumbled down onto the floor, but you notice that this has actually all been cleared up. It's all been swept, it's all been coped with by the city. Marrakesh is a huge, sprawling city, and although it is chaotic at the moment, with people sleeping rough, fearful of aftershocks, very nervous that their buildings could come down, at least the authorities here have a good idea of what has happened, who's been hurt, what's been damaged. It's a very different picture about 45 miles away from us in the epicenter, up in the Atlas Mountains, where there are still so many questions asked, where buildings have pancaked down, and that, of course, is where the fears are that the number of dead will grow on this day when Morocco has been profoundly shaken. It struck on a busy Friday night, just as Marrakesh buzzed with people, this city a magnet for tourism. They fled from restaurants and from shopping centres, utterly terrified. Debris falling all around them in the historic city centre, destroying cars and trapping people under the rubble. This is the worst earthquake the region has seen in years. Its tremors felt as far away as Portugal. On a typical Friday night, the heart of Marrakesh is full of locals and tourists enjoying meals in restaurants like this one. All it took was a few seconds of an earthquake to reduce this to rubble, to cause chaos in this city and devastation in the towns and villages near the epicenter.
We were surprised by an intense vibration. Everything in the house was moving. We didn't know what happened.
I was in my house. I saw people going outside. I heard a lot of noise. I thought it was rain, but it was the sound of the earthquake.
The damage seen in the heritage site of Medina. But the worst hit areas are in the towns and villages in the Atlas Mountains, less than 50 miles from the city, where blocked roads have slowed rescue efforts. It will take days to gauge just how devastating this earthquake is. But if videos from the hardest hit areas are any indication of the scale, the number of dead will continue to rise. The small rural town of Addersill, not far from the epicentre, almost completely reduced to rubble. In Marrakesh, daylight demonstrated the sheer scale of the destruction. Homes flattened, frantic recovery efforts now underway.
Typically, the first few days and hours is critical for the response. So the key need now is to focus on those potentially still alive and buried under the rubble. Locating and extracting them is the priority.
And look at the Medina district, the heart of Marrakesh, loved by its citizens, familiar to so many visitors, now battered and broken. Hospitals are calling for blood donations as the number of injured keeps climbing. And people exhausted by a night spent sleeping in the street remain on very high alert. They are shaken by the tremors and traumatized by the way in which their world could be so violently, horribly and quickly shaken. Well, Morocco has declared 3 days of national mourning and the world is springing into action. The UK, France, the United States have all offered aid. In fact, we saw a team from the Netherlands when we came out here who were waiting at Amsterdam airport for the call to come in. But there are signs, even here in Marrakesh, which is trying to get back to normal, so many signs of the damage, including camps of displaced people who are all over the city. They're making camps along the main road. Now, we showed you the damage done to this mosque, and sometimes it's easy to almost think, well, it's sort of forensic, that cities can get back to life. But look at the reality. This car was clearly parked here when the earthquake struck. And this has been hit by the rubble that has tumbled down from this building, and it hasn't been cleared up at all. Imagine being in this vehicle. The roof collapses in on you. This heavy rocks, these stones, these weigh a lot. And the damage and devastation that has been caused to this vehicle, well, you wouldn't want to be sitting anywhere near it. Now put that on a wider scale. These villages that are up in the Atlas Mountains made with flimsy material, and some of the images that have come out from there are shocking, of buildings that have simply been wiped away or pancaked down. And that, I'm afraid, is why the more people who get to those areas, the more research they do. I don't think there is any doubt that the number of dead is going to rise. The only question is, how steeply will it rise?
Adam Parsons, live from Marrakesh. Thank you. Well, our science correspondent Thomas Moore now examines what could have caused the earthquake.
This is a once-in-a-generation earthquake for Morocco. The US Geological Survey timed the quake at just after 11 o'clock on Friday night. It measured magnitude 6.8 with an epicentre near the town of Addersill in the high Atlas Mountains. An aftershock with a magnitude of 4.9 was recorded just 19 minutes later. The main shock was relatively shallow, just 11.5 miles below the surface. As a result, it's likely to have caused damage across a wide area. Seismic maps released by US scientists show intense shaking would have affected hundreds of square miles. In Marrakesh, around 50 miles to the north, some buildings were reduced to rubble. The old city walls were damaged. And it was felt in Casablanca, around 160 miles away. The epicentre was around 350 miles south of the boundary between the tectonic plate that Africa sits on and the Eurasian plate that supports Europe and Asia. The two plates are moving roughly 24 millimetres or an inch every year relative to each other, with immense pressure being released in juddering seismic shocks. But such strong earthquakes are rare in Morocco, though poor construction can result in many deaths. In 2004, a magnitude 6.3 quake in Al-Hoceima on the Mediterranean coast caused more than 600 deaths. And in 1960, between 12,000 and 15,000 people died in a magnitude 5.8 quake near Agadir. Survivors of the current earthquake are likely to experience further aftershocks, which could cause weakened buildings to collapse, but they're likely to become less frequent and less intense over the coming days.
Police have thanked the public for help in recapturing the escaped terror suspect Daniel Khalife. He was arrested by the side of a canal in West London after a 3-day manhunt. Well, Daniel Khalife went missing on Wednesday morning after leaving Wandsworth Prison unseen at just after 7:30, hidden under a food lorry. At some point between 7:32 and 8:37, Khalife left the van and was spotted near Wandsworth roundabout. A witness has told Sky News he spotted Khalife at around 10 o'clock on Friday morning at the gates of the graveyard on Corney Road in Chiswick. Well, Khalife was arrested at 10:41 this morning next to a canal near Northolt in West London, as our national correspondent Tom Parminter reports.
They found him pedalling along the towpath, a nationwide manhunt that ended at the bottom of these steps, as one plainclothes police officer dragged the suspect off his bike. Daniel Khalife was smiling and even laughing as he was being handcuffed. He was arrested around 12 miles from Wandsworth Prison, where he escaped on Wednesday. He was clinging on underneath this food truck as it left the jail.
We will pivot all of our resources from the manhunt for Daniel Khalife into now ensuring that we conduct a full investigation into how he escaped and any further criminal charges and anyone that might have helped him.
Hello, mate, sorry, you're in the middle of the crime scene at the moment. Do you mind just stepping out to the top end of Corney Road for me?
The net closed in overnight. The sightings always suggested he hadn't gone far. One witness saw him twice on Friday, once near the River Thames and then in this shelter on the edge of a graveyard in Chiswick.
He was just probably sitting where you are, on the bench facing the window, facing the doorway bit, and he was just had his head down, I could see his cap, the same cap he was wearing on the bench, and he was just on his phone, scrolling or texting or something. He was a fit, young guy. When I got home, I thought, well, maybe that was the escaped con. Maybe that was him. Maybe I should call somebody.
The former soldier, whose mother was born in Iran, was in custody accused of terrorism offences. Recapturing him involved vast numbers of Met police officers and the British security services.
I'm very pleased with the news, and my thanks to the police officers for their fantastic work over the past couple of days, but also to the public who came forward with an enormous number of leads to help the police in their inquiries.
Wandsworth Prison is now at the centre of the investigation. His arrest brings relief after an embarrassing escape.
The fact that he was arrested just here, not that far from the prison, suggests he may well have been fending for himself for the past 4 days. It's not yet clear if he did have any outside help, but in 75 hours on the run, Daniel Khalife didn't get far.
He is now back behind bars, arrested on suspicion of being unlawfully at large and also escaping lawful custody. Tom Parminter, Sky News, West London.
Sky's Ashna Harinag joins us now live from New Scotland Yard. And Ashna, he may well be back in police custody, but there are still so many unanswered questions around his escape.
Yeah, criticism, first of all, over the speed of the Metropolitan Police's response, particularly after the reports that some residents and witnesses had made 999 calls citing genuine concerns that they'd seen Daniel Khalife in the early hours, and yet there was no arrest till early this morning. There were also questions about how this happened in the first place, particularly whether this escape was a symptom of a broken prison system, particularly as it happened at Wandsworth Prison, where we know there have been multiple failings, issues around staff shortages, over overcrowding and reports of an alleged out-of-date security system. Some of those questions, too, surround why an accused terror suspect was being held in a Category B prison. And crucially, perhaps, for the here and now, whether he had any help inside or indeed out. The Justice Secretary, Alex Chalk, says that an independent inquiry will establish the circumstances around this escape. But he will face some further questions when he's on the Channel tomorrow and faces some tough questions from Trevor Phillips, no doubt. But in terms of tonight, Daniel Khalife back in police custody after more than 3 days on the run.
Ashna Harinag, thank you. Rishi Sunak says the UK and India will need more time before they seal a post-Brexit trade deal. Speaking after meeting his Indian counterpart at the G20 Leaders Summit in New Delhi, the Prime Minister said there's a lot of hard work that needs to be done before an agreement can be reached. Our political correspondent Tamara Cohen reports from Delhi.
An audience with the Indian Prime Minister and Rishi Sunak at pains to make a very good impression.
This is excellent. Everything is excellent. This is beautiful.
After the glad handing, a 20-minute meeting, trade the first order of business.
Did you raise the trade deal and what do you feel you achieved in it?
Well, Prime Minister Modi and I had a very warm and productive discussion on a range of different things. With regard to the trade deal, there's a desire on both of our parts to see a successful trade deal concluded. The opportunities are there for both countries. I'm confident that there is a deal there to be done, but as I said, there is hard work to go in order to achieve it.
The backdrop to this summit had been deep divisions between its members about Russia's invasion of Ukraine. But against expectations, they managed to agree a joint leaders' declaration.
Because of the hard work done by our team and collaboration from all of you, we have been able to achieve consensus on the New Delhi G20 Leaders Summit Declaration.
One of the UK's key goals for this summit was to deepen Russia's isolation. Some progress there, but not without hurdles.
Rishi Sunak is eager to present this summit as a win, both domestically and on global issues. He celebrated the wording agreed by G20 leaders, saying it had been tough on Russia. In fact, their statement focused on the impact of the invasion on global food prices and noted that members had different views on the situation. He wouldn't confirm whether he's raised the Russia issue with Prime Minister Modi.
The Prime Minister insists that it's moments like these where the real summit progress happens on the margins outside the official meetings. And there weren't many of those on this trip. Modi, the only G20 member he met for a one-on-one. Back home, he's faced criticism.
I think that he does arrive as a diminished figure, not because of what the UK can do. The UK can do incredible things internationally, but I'm afraid we have been let down by Rishi Sunak and this government.
Downing Street say trade negotiations between the UK and Indian teams will now begin at pace, inching closer to the ambitious deal he wants, but not yet within reach. Tamara Cohen, Sky News, Delhi.
The Met Office says today has been the hottest day of the year so far, with a temperature of 32.7 Celsius recorded at Heathrow Airport. But there's now a yellow weather warning for flash flooding for central England and Wales. Sky's Becky Johnson reports from Stratford-upon-Avon.
Finally, a taste of summer. After months when warm weather was in short supply, for many, this heat wave is better late than never.
How was it?
Yeah,
so nice. Yeah, lovely.
Here in Stratford-upon-Avon, riverside businesses are making up for lost time. This boat hire company hasn't had queues like this very often this year.
Whenever the sun comes out, the customers come down and, yeah, we can start trading again. Certainly shaping up to be one of the best weeks that we've had since the good weather came rolling in a few days ago. And, yeah, we'll take it as much as we can. Long may it continue.
And while it does, families have been keen to make the most of it.
It's been great. The sun's out. Enjoy it while it lasts.
But we were fingers crossed praying that this was going to happen, and it has, so.
But some are questioning why it's quite so warm.
I think it is a little bit worrying. You do naturally worry about climate change, especially with the children and what the weather's going to be like when they're older.
The UK has never seen such a long spell of September days when temperatures reach above 30 degrees.
Thank you very much, driver. It's a lovely ride, yeah?
So is this the result of climate change or simply a very hot week? According to the Met Office, it's a bit of both.
The fact that human influences on climate change are bringing more hot spells to the UK, and they're becoming more frequent and more severe as we go into the future. But it is also partly due to the current setup that we've got due to the tropical Atlantic weather. So hurricanes there have helped to bring us the current weather pattern across the UK.
But anyone hoping the heat is here to stay will be disappointed to hear change is on the way.
Thunderstorms are now expected to spread across large parts of the UK, bringing an end to all of this. yet more extreme weather before things become a bit more normal again next week.
So grab one of these while you can before British weather returns to business as usual. Becky Johnson, Sky News, Stratford-upon-Avon.
Prince Harry has launched this year's Invictus Games for injured service personnel with a tribute to competitors from Ukraine. He also made use of his language skills as he opened the event in the German city of Dusseldorf. From there, our royal correspondent Laura Bundock reports.
I am Invictus.
Not everything Harry does goes down well, but listen to the cheers as he took centre stage.
Guten Abend zusammen und herzlich willkommen zu den Invictus Games 2023 here in Düsseldorf.
The Invictus Games, not just a pet project, but Harry's personal passion, with a shout out for Ukraine and Tyra, who was captured by the Russians.
I don't think I've ever met someone as courageous and resilient as you. I think I can speak for everyone when I say that you embody the true spirit of Ukraine and of Invictus.
After a year of tension, Harry seemed relaxed. No sign of Meghan, but a hint she'll be here.
Now, I'm not saying we play favourites in our home, but since my wife discovered that she is of Nigerian descent, it's likely to get a little bit more competitive this year.
Ask competitors, and Harry's long involvement means a lot.
I've met him a few times now, and he's always very supportive. He's keen to hear your stories about mental health and things like that in particular.
This whole event is all down to him. It was his brainchild. It's amazing. He may not get good headlines anywhere else, but he's not going to get a bad word off me.
Even Harry's critics would agree Invictus is a big success.
We've heard a lot from Prince Harry recently, but the Harry here is a very different Duke of Sussex. Invictus feels like a homecoming for him. This is Prince Harry back on much more familiar territory.
He's not the only royal talking sport.
The Prince and Princess of Wales and the Princess Royal, thank you so much for joining us on The Good, the Bad and the Rugby. It's very, very nice to see you. I hope you've summered well. I hope you're excited about all things Rugby World Cup.
Rugby, the chat from the sofas at Windsor. His family relations aren't fixed, but this is Harry moving forward, resetting the agenda and rebuilding his brand. Laura Bundock, Sky News, Dusseldorf.
OK, time now to get the latest sport now from Sky Sports News with Selena.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality. Getting more life with Vitality.
She's known by Luton fans as the Old Girl, and the Old Girl has had a bit of a makeover. A new look Kenilworth Road, up to scratch and ready for the Premier League. The chief executive has been right across every aspect of the £10 million rebuild and invited our cameras along to record every step, starting back in mid-May and that very special final night at the Old Girl.
This throwback of a stadium, the stadium that is going to have some real logistical issues to address if they are promoted. Oh, that's useful, and in! Lockyer! Kenilworth Road erupts! Luton Town are Wembley bound! Luton enjoy the taste of EFL playoff victory.
Wembley went well, of course, and within moments of celebration starting, work on preparing Kenilworth Road for the Premier League began.
The time we won at Wembley, we did literally have trucks parked up outside ready to go, so there's no minute left really spare. We had to get going straight away. It's a military operation. We've literally every single hour of the day has been spent in every corner of the ground doing something.
A military operation indeed. It had to be best foot forward to get it all done in time. Only around 90 days to do so much, including a new stand with TV gantry, upgraded floodlights, new toilets, technical area, improvements to the away dressing room, safe standing, new main entrance extra parking, media suite, TV studio, extra and better disabled facilities. Not to mention relaying the pitch after all the construction was done, and underneath it all, £1 million worth of cabling. That's where electrician David Wood comes in. He's a big Luton fan.
Absolutely amazing to be in the Premier League. I say I was down here for 20 years, so I was here in the conference when we had, 12, 14 away fans coming down on a dark Tuesday night. But to be in the Premier League, just amazing. I can't wait. I'm so excited.
Down the road in Luton, there's a brand new stadium on the way. But until then, Kenilworth Road remains home. The big change for the big league is the new Bobbers stand. Gone are those corporate and executive boxes hastily erected in the 1980s. Replaced by a state-of-the-art TV gantry needed to help cater for 50 matchday cameras. And below the gantry, room for around 1,000 new seats. The extra capacity means Kenilworth Road won't be the smallest stadium in the Premier League. Bournemouth will. Gary Sweet has one eye on this season and one eye on the future.
It's really, really important that we bring this alive and make it feel like it's integrated as a part of the football stadium. Now, we could have done this an awful lot cheaper and actually in some ways quicker. But I think what we're doing here is actually adding to Kenilworth Road. We're improving it, we're making it feel like it's a part of the old goal that exists. This stand here is going to be taller, it's going to be more imposing on this side. There'll be supporters on this side making a noise as well that you won't be able to avoid, that opposition players won't be able to avoid. The structural engineers that we've used are used to building things for the likes of Glastonbury and other festivals and a lot of the expos around the world. We don't really like waste, so we're trying to reuse a lot of it. And if we can't use it, then somebody else will.
Despite all the changes, this stadium remains as traditional as they come. Situated amidst the terraced houses, you can sense the almost 120 years of history. The relegations, the promotions, non-league to Premier League, the bad times, the good times, the rainy days, and now, of course, the sunshine. And at Kenilworth Road now, as for the past 50 years, you're never far away from Mr. Sunshine himself. The famous fan and former club director would think the new mix of traditional and new very wise.
Bring me. This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's papers in the press preview for you, including this story on the front of the Sunday People on the earthquake in Morocco. Their headline, Hell on Earth. Well, tonight we're joined by the journalist and author Christina Patterson and the barrister and futurist Andrew Eborn.
The idea was to have one of the most iconic landmarks in Paris, but was too classical to have just the Eiffel Tower. And actually, all the details that you can find in the Sacré-Cœur make it even more challenging. This is our job, you know, like a pastry chef, we have to make everything edible, made of. So here is sugar, but it could be chocolate or whatever. And this is very interesting to work the matter. What few years ago, that wasn't the question. Now people want something much healthier, and we got to work on that. So even me on my recipe, I try to reduce as much as I can. I say as much as I can because then when you go too low, it's not good. You have to get a little bit of sugar. You have to get a little bit of salt.
Of course.
Right? Bread without salt is disgusting.
No, completely. Yeah. But when it comes to the more edible, the more immediately accessible kind of aspects of your work, I mean, how much sugar can you cut out? I mean, compared to where you were a few years ago, how much have you been able to remove?
Could you believe me if I can say maybe half of it?
No, really.
Compared to, I started 20 years ago, more than that, and we really reduce it, almost half of it. Depending of the recipe, some it works, some it doesn't, because sugar helps also for the texture and structures. But for simple cake, you can reduce, just basic cake that you can do at home, you can reduce almost half of it. And it's still good and still yummy. So this one I made it in Paris a month ago. It came in London for Kellogg's Reductive Art Exhibition. That will be in Oxo Gallery for those 2 days coming. Then it's going back to Paris next week. And finally, it will go to Kellogg's office in Paris.
I'm Katie Spencer, and I'm Sky News' arts and entertainment correspondent. Maverick here on the red carpet. I'm so excited, Tom Cruise. Katie Spencer, Sky News in London.
Welcome back. This is Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview for you, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. But first, our top stories this evening. Morocco State TV says that more than 2,000 people are now known to have died in a powerful earthquake, with the number of casualties expected to rise further. Police have thanked the public for help in recapturing the escaped terror suspect Daniel Khalife. Rishi Sunak says the UK and India will need more time before the two countries agree a post-Brexit trade deal. Hello there, you're watching the press preview. A first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive into us here. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with the journalist and author Christina Patterson and the barrister and futurist Andrew Eborn. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you. Starting with the Sunday Telegraph reports on the end of a 4-day manhunt for terror suspect Daniel Khalife. He was arrested in Greenford earlier today. I'll escape, just watch me. The Daily Mirror reports the fugitive was bragging about his plan to escape prison before he did on Wednesday. Likewise, the Sunday Express covers the fugitive's arrest, saying he was carrying a sleeping bag and riding a bike when found. On the front page of the Sunday People, hell on earth, more than 1,000 people dead as an earthquake rocks Morocco. The Observer reports on the former roles of the man who's due to succeed Dame Alison Rose as chief executive of NatWest. In particular, his time working for the UK arm of a Saudi oil group. There is, however, no suggestion of any wrongdoing on his part. And the Sunday edition of The Star remarks on today's sweltering heat and forecasts one final day of the same tomorrow. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code that's on your screen right now during the programme, you can check out those front pages of tomorrow's papers while you watch us. Well, we are joined tonight by Christina Patterson and Andrew Eborn. Good evening to you.
Good evening.
It has to be said, most of the front page is dominated by the Daniel Khalife escape and recapture, an extraordinary story. Everyone's been following it blow by blow over the last few days. Christina, the Sunday Express saying they caught him on the canal on a bike ride, and he was denying that it was him at that time.
Well, he's hardly going to say, yes, here I am, I'm dying to find you. I mean, thank goodness he's been caught. They've obviously put enormous amounts of resource and a lot of people on his trail. What is clear is that he had support because he had a bike, which he clearly didn't have when he left prison. He had clothes. Apparently, he had a cool bag full of lovely food. Well, we don't know if it was lovely, but it was presumably quite nice, carefully packed for him by we don't know who. So there will be other people involved in this story. What we don't know is how much any of this was set up in advance. We don't know who helped him in the prison. The thing that is overwhelmingly clear, and anyone who knows anything about the prison system won't be surprised about this, is that prisons, and in particular Wandsworth, but generally prisons, are hugely under-resourced. They've had such incredible cuts post-austerity, post the 2010 George Osborne, David Cameron austerity drive. They lost, I think, about a third of their employees. A lot of the most experienced prison officers left. Many of the people have been brought in are kind of 18-year-olds who get minimal training. And so it's really not very surprising. It's shocking, but it's not surprising. And I just hope that the thing that comes out of this is that the horrific state of our prisons is exposed so that we can't ignore this problem anymore, because it has been ignored for decades.
It's interesting, isn't it? It's a story that has forced everyone to focus on the politics around it, really, hasn't it? And in fact, in the Mirror, Andrew, he says he bragged he'd do it.
He certainly did.
Clearly, he thought he could get away with it.
Absolutely. And it is interesting, and the sort of mindset here is that we sort of make these sort of folk heroes, don't you? People who escape. I mean, the last person famously escaping from Wandsworth was Ronnie Biggs all those years ago. On the 8th of July 1965. And he obviously escaped for a long time. And he even bragged about how he helped somebody else escape in the same way as Khalife did. And so it is interesting. There's lots of questions to be answered, not least why it took an hour before the Met were made aware of it. But also in this country, we're one of the most surveyed people of all in the world. And it's been estimated, over 7 million CCTV cameras recording us about 70 times a day. In London alone, it's close to 1 million cameras. And normally, every time you use a credit card or a mobile phone, you can track those sort of things. They suspected that he probably didn't have those at this stage. But it seemed a bit strange that he was on his bike on a towpath. I mean, you would think he would go into hiding, because the police themselves turn around and say, if they don't catch you within the first hour or so, it makes it incredibly difficult. But extraordinary situation, lots of questions to be asked, and let's see what's going to come out in the next few days.
Yeah, and as we were saying, the state of prisons has been highlighted, hasn't it? Prison Officers Association speaking earlier today and yesterday to Sky News highlighting that fact. And the Telegraph on their front page saying that he laughed when he was arrested. It's clearly become a cat and mouse game for him, and something that he clearly thought he was very much capable of doing.
Well, it was interesting because yesterday we had some of the family members coming out saying that he'd been captured very seriously, and actually it worried him a lot. There might be some mental health issues and so on and so forth. So a laugh can work in all sorts of ways that we've seen famously with politicians. It could be a nervous laugh and so on and so forth. There are different ways of reporting these things. What we do know is there's been a massive rush to fill the vacuum of information, and people have speculated about everything. It's also important that at the moment he hasn't gone through the trial. He was only on remand. He hasn't been found guilty. He's not a terrorist yet.
We don't really know much about him as a person.
Exactly.
Or what exactly he's done.
But all of that will come out. I think his trial's set for November, but various other issues will come out, no doubt, in the next few days. But everybody's innocent until proven guilty. Let's wait and see what the evidence suggests. But certainly it does raise those questions.
Yeah, and if we talk a bit more, Christina, about the fact that it raises the issues of the state of prisons, the fact that, you know, why was he even in Wandsworth? Why, some people are asking why was he not in Belmarsh, I believe, but also why did it take the police so long? But interestingly, the police are saying this is a celebration of how police and public can work together to capture people.
Well, they obviously,
uphold the law, at least.
Well, the millions of cameras that Andrew mentioned, which clearly are not terribly effective at solving crime because, as we know, an enormous number of crimes are not being solved by the police, including pretty much every shoplifting incident in the country at the moment, and that's been going on for a long time. So we clearly can't. We can rely on cameras to catch us when we go 2 miles over the speed limit, but not necessarily in any other circumstances. But yeah, I mean, the bigger questions are that prisons are prisoner factories. They are crime factories, basically. And the level, if anyone, I have been in prisons and they are shocking, really shocking. Most people wouldn't believe the condition that people are left in. And because they're so badly resourced and staffed, many prisoners are locked away for, 23 hours a day. The chance that they will get any opportunity to get any kind of rehabilitation, education that might support them into employment when they leave prison, that's for the birds. And it's a really primitive system. And it really makes me angry the way that our politicians, and particularly Tory politicians, are constantly talking about being tough on crime. Well, if you really want to be tough in crime, you should stop it. And the best way to stop it is to have proper rehabilitation and to support, to reduce crime. We have exactly the opposite. We have crime factories in this country in a really primitive way. They are squalid, they are full of drugs, they are full of weapons, they are just... I mean, we should be profoundly ashamed of our prison system.
But what will also happen, it will accelerate the conversation about how technology can help. So I talk about artificial intelligence around the world, and we look at that sort of side. The TikTok things you might remember on Oxford Street, a lot of that, they talk about facial recognition. They could basically prevention being better than cure. What's going to happen is going to accelerate that. And already on minor offences, such as driving offences, they're picking up things with AI cameras now can show people holding a mobile phone and report that. So what's interesting is why it took so long to find him, bearing in mind the amount that he was being recorded all of that time. And clearly he wasn't hiding, he was on a bike on a towpath.
Yeah, well we could probably have another entire debate show about how to handle these kind of situations, but we've got to move on. Another big story of the day, of course, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has been in India for the G20 summit. Also, of course, that great tagline of India's son-in-law returning. He is, of course, of Indian heritage. His wife is Indian. The Express, page 6 and 7, talking about the Rwanda deal being up for discussion. The government, of course, clearly trying to say that this is a benchmark plan and policy that others might follow.
Well, it is interesting because, and people have made the analogy, we've spent lots of resources stopping one man leaving the country. From September the 2nd, if I remember the statistics, there's 2,188 were coming in on the boats. Illegally. So it is a big issue, and Rishi is always going to be haunted by one of his 5 pledges to stop the boat. So they need to find a sensible solution. Rwanda's turned into one of those sort of nasty words in a sense that it hasn't worked. And they talk about the huge amount of money that's been spent trying to make it work. But certainly we need a solution. It's fine talking about it, but looking on that sort of basis, they need to come up and say, this is the deal, this is how we're going to cope with it accordingly, and stop the boats in those ways. Because the real sympathy side goes out to those who are actually on those boats. It's the traffickers who we really need to target.
And Christina, staying with migration, apparently, according to the Telegraph, he's been discussing migration with, of course, a very welcoming audience for that kind of discussion. Meloni, the Italian Prime Minister.
Yes, well, I mean, given that she is from the Brothers of Italy, which has its roots in Mussolini's fascism, I'm not sure that this is really the kind of political partnership that Rishi Sunak should be seen to be fostering. It's one thing to ally yourself with sort of conservative governments across Europe, but to particularly pick Giorgia Meloni, who, has in many ways appeared to be slightly more moderate than people might have feared since she took over in Italy. But Italy's problems with migration are much, much, much bigger than ours. If the numbers of boats that come into both Sicily and the south of Italy, and obviously Africa is much nearer, the scale of it's it's just completely on a different scale. And if you go to Rome, you see hundreds, thousands of young men sleeping rough in the parks. So the fact is, of course, I think that there is an issue here. And as Andrew says, our hearts go out to all those who come over on the boats, because let's be clear, these are not people trying to buck a system. I mean, in one sense, they might be, because they are not necessarily all genuine asylum seekers, but they are all escaping from a life they perceive to be unbearable or extremely difficult to a life they hope will be better. And I think most of us, given the opportunity, would probably do the same thing. Whether that is fair to the British taxpayer is a whole other question, and it does depend on a model of criminal people smuggling, which is utterly immoral, amoral and cruel and exploitative and ruthless. So, of course, we must smash that model. But to pretend, as politicians do, that these are easy questions to solve is utterly ridiculous. Many of millions of people outside Western Europe would love to have a tiny taste of the luxury that we enjoy in our lives every day. Nobody can blame them for wanting to come here. It is extremely hard to police all the borders of an island like the UK, and we can't pretend this is an easy problem to solve. And you know, we can pay African countries to, you know, take the people we don't want. Whether that will work or not, I don't particularly approve of it as an idea. But we can't.
Of course, the argument is to provide safe routes where we can actually process people in a correct manner.
But as always, frankly, it's a case of abnegating our problems to poorer countries, and I don't really approve of that approach to things. But it's not going to solve the problem.
No, and you're absolutely right. We do have to make sure that you address the fair ones, and not everybody's coming here because they've got hardships in their own country. There are some people who are abusing the system, not least the criminal gangs who are bringing people over. We need to address it on all sorts of things. It's not being properly addressed at the moment. We can agree on that.
Yeah, fairness is the word there, isn't it? OK, we're going to just take a quick break. But coming up, for the first time in a long time, Prince Harry gets some good publicity. We'll discuss that next. Stay tuned.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles.
It's turning everybody into, you know, a crazy, violent drug addict.
How are you feeling?
I am angry.
It is an anti-woman agenda.
2 women say that you paid for their abortions. Are you a hypocrite, sir? Will your candidates win?
I hope so. I think they will. I think they're great candidates.
I gotta be realistic. My sister's dead.
More than 4 weeks on, there's no murder weapon and no suspect. Are you going to catch this killer?
We are doing everything we can.
Ghislaine Maxwell has pleaded not guilty to all 6 charges against her. Mum, how are you feeling today?
Jeffrey said, you answer to Ghislaine, you just don't cross her.
We're so excited.
Severe nightmares of these people coming in and just taking me in the middle of the night.
I've watched as whole towns were torn apart by natural disaster.
I'm alive and I'm thankful for that, but there are a lot of people who aren't.
It's not the winds people fear most here, it's the water. We take you to the heart of the stories which shape our world. Do you truly believe what you're saying?
A lot of cases that I know are reported from Ukrainian missiles themselves.
Ambassador, with respect, I think that's preposterous.
I'm Dan Whitehead and I'm Sky News' West of England correspondent.
Welcome back. You're watching the press preview. With me tonight is Christina Patterson and Andrew Eborn, and we've been taking you through the front pages. So, of course, another big story today. Prince Harry taking the stage at the Invictus Games again. I know, look, all smiles all round, isn't it? It's wonderful. Andrew, this is something that is something that he can really showcase that's good. And we can all feel good about it too.
And at long last, there's a great story about Harry because he's dominated the publicity for the last several things about Spare and the row that he has with his brother and so on and so forth. So it's great. Invictus Games started in 2014 for injured soldiers and so on and so forth with the great motto, I am. So a bit of a Gloria Gaynor there, making people feel good. And what I love about it is totally empowering. He was so in his element today, getting out there, talking in German as well. And the crowd just loved him. So all praise for Harry. I think getting a good story about that sort of side is great. And the other thing he also does is talk about people who are injured, not just physically, but mental health as well. And I think any time that somebody in the public eye is talking about their own demons and so on and so forth has got to be helpful.
It's so important, actually, and I'm really pleased you raised that because also him being a man and a high-profile man raising that on a global stage is really important. And Christina, of course, we are also expecting Meghan to turn up at some point, and he joked about her finding out about some kind of Nigerian heritage too, and so they're going to have that kind of battle between Nigeria and Great Britain. So, yeah, good to see him back on stage in his element.
Absolutely, but you know, I have to say, and I think the Invictus Games are fantastic, and I think this is what he should do because he has a very soft heart, and he really does. You know, when he's been in Africa, when he's done his charity work, when he's doing this kind of thing, he is absolutely at his best. When, you know, he is less at his best is when he's talking about himself and his own suffering and or perceived suffering. And I think, please, Harry, can you stick to this stuff in future? Because, and I'm not disagreeing with what you say about mental health. Of course, I absolutely agree that to talk about, you know, he went through a terrible tragedy in losing his mother when he was just a child with the eyes of the world on him, and that was an incredibly difficult thing for him to go through. But I think when he focuses on other people, he's great. When he focuses on himself and his own grievances, rather less so. So can we have more of this, Harry, please?
OK, we're going to have to move on and talk about the heatwave.
Phew, what a scorcher. Absolutely.
Look at it. It's right there in all its glory. In case you missed it, 33.2
I love it, love
degrees.
it, love
You're loving it?
Oh, I love it. Yeah, bring it on. Yeah. I mean, obviously not bring on global warming and planetary disaster and the end of the world.
That's the dichotomy in the discussion, isn't it? You might want to enjoy the hot weather, but you've got to remember where it's coming from.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I mean, the whole sort of thing, 92 degrees in old money. It's not the hottest it's ever been because that was, I think, last year, 19th of July, when it reached 40.3 degrees centigrade, which was 104 in Conisbury, Lincolnshire. So scorching on that sort of basis. People are enjoying it. I was wandering out today, and there's a wonderful feeling. Good weather brings out the best in people, doesn't it?
Yeah, everyone smiles.
We all smile.
Well, in England, you're always so pathetically grateful when the sun comes out that you just can't stop smiling.
Well, it should be grateful. I think a lot of us complain as well about it when it happens. But also, I mean, there is apparently one more day of this, but there's also a risk of flash flooding happening.
And thunderstorms and that sort of stuff.
Back to being blighty.
But, you know,
plague of locusts coming along as well. I mean, it's always that sort of thing. I mean, the British love to talk about the weather, but now we're having some of the best days of all. Just enjoy it. I think the reality is, of course, it's got to rain. That's why we got such a green and pleasant land. It's going to rain a lot. But I think that sort of principle, let's get more of the sun and enjoy it while we can.
Yeah. One more day to enjoy it. What are you going to be doing tomorrow, Christina?
Sitting in the garden with a nice glass of rosé.
What will you do?
I'm flying to Vilnius. I'm going to Lithuania.
How lovely.
To fly the British flag over there and see glorious old places. I try to visit places which are more decrepit than I am. So it should be good.
OK. Right, thanks so much, Andrew Eborn and Christina Patterson. Thank you. OK, let's take a look at the weather for you now.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Well, it'll be unsettled over the next couple of days with cooler, fresher conditions spreading from the northwest. There'll be quite a muggy start tomorrow with patchy rain in the far north, some thundery showers over southwestern Britain and a few fog patches elsewhere. Central and southern Britain and the southern half of Ireland will see a scattering of heavy showers spreading in during the morning. Some torrential and thundery rain, but the southeast looks mainly dry. Elsewhere, northern Scotland will be overcast with rain at times, but most other places will be fine.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Now, coming up in the next hour on Sky News at 11, the number of people killed in a powerful earthquake in Morocco rises to more than 2,000. We'll have the very latest for you from Marrakesh. Stay tuned to Sky News.
The 5 of us have made it out of the car.
Welcome to Backstage, the film and TV podcast.